Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar about the IJLCD Editors-in-Chief, which will hopefully provide you with everything you would like to know before applying for the position. My name is Amit Kulkarni. I'm the Research Manager here at the Royal College, and today our presenters will be Stephen Bloch, who is a Senior Lecturer in Acquired Communication Disorders at UCL and one of the Editors-in-Chief of the IJLCD. We also have Cristina McKean, our other Editor-in-Chief of the IJLCD, who's a Senior Lecturer at Newcastle University. And thirdly, we'll have Nikki Roke, who's a Senior Publishing Manager at Wiley, who are the publishing company that publish the IJLCD for us. I'm just going to go on to some housekeeping issues before we start. So the webinar, we have about 45 minutes for the webinar, which we may or may not take. We will see how many questions we have at the end. Throughout the webinar, you can interact with us using the software from the webinar provider. You'll only see your names and the names of panelists in the list of participants, but please be aware that there may be others online too. You can use the chat button on the webinar software to send an instant message to me, and you can do that anytime during the event. You can use the Q&A button on the webinar software to submit a question for the panel. Please do submit as many as you want, and we'll get through as many as we can at the end of the webinar, or if there are those that we can't answer, we may well provide the answers for those in a written document afterwards. This webinar is being recorded and will go up on the RCSLT website within a couple of weeks. And my colleague Kaylee Mayetta is on hand to help answer any technical queries you have. So if you're struggling to hear or you're not able to log on correctly, then please do just send us a message to let us know. So last couple of things, there will be an evaluation form at the end. Please do pop that. Please do complete that to let us know how the webinar has gone. I'm going to move on now to the aims and objectives of the webinar itself. So, of course, this is about the roles and responsibilities of the IJLCD Editor-in-Chief. What does the Editor-in-Chief actually do on a day-to-day basis? We'll think about the expectations and the support provided by the RCSLT and from the publisher. We'll think about the changes that are happening and ongoing in the world of academic publishing and what this might mean for the Editor-in-Chief role. And we'll just make sure you have the opportunity to ask any questions you may have about the role before you consider applying. So, without further ado, I will now hand over to Stephen and Cristina, who will tell you all about what it's like to be an Editor-in-Chief of the IJLCD.
Yes, hello everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting us. And I'm just going to go through a few areas of roles and responsibilities before handing over to Cristina to continue our double act. So the IJLCD team comprises a number of people. If we're going to go from left to right here on the slide, we have two Editors-in-Chief. There's one for the developmental world and one for the acquired stroke professional educational mode. And Cristina will explain why we have two Editors-in-Chief in a second. But as part of the management of the journal, we have a number of associate editors who work with us very closely. We have associate editor for developmental work 1 and 2, and an associate editor for acquired 1. That makes up the team of people who are actually dealing with the papers on a day-to-day basis. We're a very close team. We work together well, and we ensure that we problem solve together. There's also Beth, our editorial officer, and Beth is responsible for all of our administrative processing of papers from submission. When papers first come into the office, they are dealt with by Beth to check that things are working, that they're complete, before being handed to either Cristina or myself as either a developmental or acquired stroke professional paper. We also work incredibly closely with other members of the team, Amit, the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists Research Manager, and also Nikki, representing our publisher as Editorial Manager. So together we are a team, and we meet regularly, we talk regularly, and we ensure that the journal is working as it should for both authors, readers, and professionals. In terms of roles of the Editors-in-Chief, the most important thing is to first stage screen all of the submissions and either allocate them to associate editors or decide that they aren't actually relevant for the journal, or that they're not suitable for the journal. There are lots of reasons why papers may not fit the remit, and that's the first stage role for editors-in-chief. We are then looking at editing submissions in key areas. That's acquired and developmental, educational and professional. It sometimes can be quite difficult to know whether a paper is right for the journal, which is why we can't really do that as a paper exercise. It's something that one has to do by reading through the paper and making an estimate in relation to what's current, what's new, what's been published previously. We also have an incredibly important role in recruiting and supporting our associate editor team. The journal only works because of the whole editorial team, and making sure that we have a sustainable and high achieving group of associate editors is part of our remit. We do liaise regularly with RCSLT to ensure that the journal is representing the values of college and is also meeting the college's objectives in terms of academic publishing and research. And we also liaise regularly with Wiley, our publishers, to ensure that the journal is published, ensure that the journal is marketed and moves forward into new markets. And there's also a very important role in terms of leading and developing the profile of the journal. The journal doesn't exist in a vacuum. It needs to be looked at. It changes over time, and we are keen to ensure that the journal, as editors-in-chief, really does reflect the values of college and speech and language therapists internationally. So now I'm going to hand over to Cristina to talk a bit more about the details of our processes.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. So yes, we're going to sort of unpack some of those roles that Stephen mentioned that we have as editors-in-chief and give you a little bit more detail about them. So yes, one of our most important roles is that first of all we screen all of the submissions and we allocate them to the appropriate associate editors. So all of our submissions are received in our editorial office by Beth, who manages those very efficiently for us. She does an initial check of the papers to make sure that authors have submitted all of the completed all of the checklists and all of the information that are required from us for us to take that paper forward in the review process. She then allocates them to either myself or Stephen for a first review. And we decide whether or not, as Stephen says, it's suitable for submission to the journal. Quite a large number of papers are rejected at this stage, and often we'll try to point the author to a more appropriate journal if we feel they've chosen the wrong place for their work to be published. After that initial screening phase, if we feel it's worthy of further review, we'll then allocate the submission to one of the associate editors. So we each have a team of associate editors that we work with, and we also act as associate editors ourselves. And that means that we choose reviewers, we send the paper out to the reviewers, we receive the reviews back, and we make decisions on those papers. Associate editors have delegated authority to manage allocated submissions. So once the paper is with the AE, they can make the decisions as to whether to accept, whether to review, whether to send out for additional review. But we always do this in a highly supportive manner, and all AEs we all support one another when there are difficult decisions there or issues to discuss. So as it says at the bottom here, as editors-in-chief, we also act as editors of the papers as well as of the whole journal itself. We know we've had a query, and I think we always have this query about how much time it takes to be an associate editor or an editor-in-chief. And Stephen and I and ah about this one when we talk to one another, because it changes over time. We think it probably averages out at around 2 to 3 hours a week. And editors all work differently in terms of how they allocate that time. Some people like to have a block of time and do it all in one go, and others like to fit it around their work. And also it varies depending on the time of year. Everybody likes to get their papers in just before Christmas, for example, and also the stages of where papers are up to. Okay, so we receive approximately 200 submissions a year, a little bit more than 200 submissions a year, and they cover a very wide range of SLT related topics, and as we say here, some completely unrelated, and we try to kindly signpost people somewhere else if they've sent us an unusual paper that we don't feel fits our journal. The balance varies year on year, but generally we do have a majority in the developmental field. So approximately 60% would come under developmental specialisms, 35% in the sort of more acquired communication disabilities, and 5% in our other category, which usually the majority of those are about teaching and training and practitioner development, I would say. So as a result, we have 3 of us are working in the developmental sphere and 2 in the acquired, just in terms of managing the workload of the papers that are coming through. Our role as well is around recruiting and supporting the associate editors. So we, Stephen and I, interview and recruit and appoint the associate editors, and they each have a 3-year fixed term contract, and there's an option of extending that contract to a 2nd term if both parties feel that that's appropriate for them. We interview the associate editors and we provide an induction and support. And for example, I've just inducted our newest AE this last week, in fact, and inducted her into all of our processes and procedures. We work very hard to make sure that we work as a team and ensure that all AEs feel that they know what their responsibilities are, but also that they know where to get help, advice and support if they feel that they need if they're unsure about processes or they have difficulties with a particular paper. And we support one another to just keep an eye on processing times to ensure that IJLCD keeps its reputation as a journal that manages papers in a speedy and efficient way for authors. And we also ensure that the editorial team receive payment as it is in their contracts. Okay, so I'll hand back to Stephen now, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about our work with RCSLT.
Okay, thank you, Cristina. Very briefly, and to reinforce messages that I think we've probably stressed enough already, we do liaise with Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists a lot. They're very important. We're collaborative partners, and that means regular contact via email, Skype, and in person. I'm actually looking at Amit as I speak, which is very important to me. So research manager, Amit, also research trustee. There's a sense here that the IJLCD is a part of Royal College's research and is a part of speech and language therapists in the UK's research, but it's also an international journal. So there is a sense here that we are representing British speech and language therapy, UK speech and language therapy, and its values and standards internationally. That also involves collaboration on new initiatives, input to related activities, and then we have a number of other important collaborative practices. There's the Student Prize Award, the annual conference. We provide copy for bulletin for various things, and also we input into the contracting and tendering process for the journal. So there's absolutely, it's absolute pleasure working with Royal College, and a very important part of our role. And as well as the college, we also have our publishers Wiley, with whom again we enjoy very close relationships, very close liaison, regular emails, Skypes regarding publishing, promoting the journal, website updates. Wiley are there for us, and we're a part of their suite of services, which we'll hear in a minute. But they have been and are very responsive to making updates and changes when we need them. So it's again a pleasure working with them. We're also required to make prompt decisions about the issue content. So every few months we get an email saying, can we please select the papers in process that are ready for publishing? And that ultimately is down to the editors-in-chief to decide what appears in the journal. And that's a decision that we have to make. And again, is a great privilege, and it's something that we tend to do very promptly to ensure that the journal is published on time. We also have the facility for virtual issues, where we can harvest the great catalogue of papers that have been published in the journal over the years, and marketing liaison, so actually promoting the journal worldwide and inputting with Wiley on how we think the journal should be viewed by others outside our profession. And with that, I'm just going to hand back to Cristina for a few more words before we move forward.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. So yes, the last thing we just wanted to talk about is the role of the editor-in-chief in leading and developing the profile of the journal. So I think Stephen and I both feel it's a privilege to be able to contribute to ensuring that research that is going to make a difference for people with speech, language and communication needs is disseminated quickly, and to ensure that we have the highest quality research out there informing the profession. So one way to make sure that that work really does make a difference is to make sure that our journal is known and is read and that people use it, both practitioners, but also that we're attracting the best possible researchers to submit their papers to us. So part of our role is making sure people know about IJLCD and think about it as their go-to journal to submit and to read. So we have an annual away day where we meet with RCSLT and with our publishers Wiley, and we develop strategy about how to make sure that we do develop the profile of the journal. We have the annual lecture as well, which in recent years we've been videoing the annual lecture and posting that up onto the website, and that's proven to be a very popular initiative, particularly the video of Dorothy Bishop with a link to the Raddled campaign, for example. Last year, we instigated the Student Prize Award, which is which our publishers support financially, which again is part of our commitment to making sure that research remains central to the speech and language therapy profession, and that we're supporting the development of the researchers of the future. We also work to develop our editorial board and ensure that we have on our board the leading researchers in the field of SLT, so that we can draw on them for submissions and for editorial support. There's always scope for new initiatives. For example, I think the social media presence of IJLCD has really improved over the last few years, but there's, as Stephen said, the context within which we're working changes all of the time. So there's lots of scope, and there's a need for us to remain creative in terms of fulfilling our objective as part of IJLCD. And that's one of the very nice parts of the role, I would say. Okay, so now I'm going to hand you over to Nikki Roke, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the role of our publisher. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Cristina. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be involved in today's webinar. So I'm here to tell you a bit about me and Wiley as the publishing partner for the IJLCD. So I am a senior journals publishing manager working in Wiley's psychology and human behaviour team. I've worked in academic society publishing for 10 years. I've worked society side and publisher side. I started my career at the British Ecological Society, actually working with Wiley as their publisher. So I do have insight what it's like to be on the other side of this relationship. I've worked at the Microbiology Society on their portfolio of self-published journals as their editorial and development manager. And I was previously at Springer Nature as a senior editor for some of their health and life sciences journals. So I joined Wiley earlier this year in January, and I'm really enjoying working in the social sciences, which is my personal background. I have a master's in linguistics from UCL, and I did actually consider studying further to become a speech and language therapist. So I particularly enjoy working with the IJLCD and the college, and I find the mission of the college and content of the journal to be extremely interesting, relevant, and so important. So I am the primary day-to-day contact at Wiley for all matters relating to the development, strategic direction, performance, and operations of the IJLCD. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Wiley, but just to give you a quick overview of who we are. So working with scholarly organisations really lies at the heart of what we do. We work with researchers, learners, universities and corporations to achieve their goals. Our philosophy is that the researcher is our North Star and we are guided by them in the services and products that we provide. We publish more journals with partners than any other publisher in the world, and we really market ourselves as a society publisher. More than half of our 1,700 peer-reviewed journals are published on behalf of organisations such as RCSLT. We are a global organisation with 32 offices around the world. Our headquarters are based in Hoboken in the US, and our head office in the UK is in Oxford, where I am based. So how do we work with the college and the IJLCD? So we have a team at Wiley who work on the IJLCD in close partnership with Stephen and Cristina and Amit at the college. I often describe myself as a front man of a band. I am the main contact, but it's very much a team effort working on the journal. So I have colleagues in editorial, production, marketing, membership and distribution and sales all working on the IJLCD, and we are in regular contact with Stephen and Cristina and Amit. We provide a lot of important documentation for the editors in the college. We provide an annual marketing plan, an annual publisher and marketing reports, which record and analyse key performance metrics over the past year, annual citation reports that we provide each year after the release of the impact factor, and we also provide sort of more informal quarterly marketing updates. We attend the annual away day each year, where in collaboration with Stephen and Cristina and the college, we discuss the strategic development of the journal. And as Cristina mentioned, we sponsor the annual lecture and their Editor's Choice Prize. So as you are likely aware, there are major changes taking place in the publishing landscape, and we're currently discussing how to respond to this and implement a strategy for the IJLCD for the next 4 to 5 years. And we really see the Editors-in-Chief playing a major role in leading and implementing this strategy. So right now, people are paying to read the IJLCD, and the college and Wiley earn revenue from journal subscriptions from institutions. In the future, it's more likely that reading will be free and that people will be paying to publish, or an interim period of paying to publish and read. Right now, there's not that much open access content in IJLCD, but this is set to change. So why the change? I'm sure you've all heard of Coalition S and Plan S. There is growing support for publicly funded research to be publicly accessible and available. The open access movement really started back in about the year 2000, and journals have really made quite slow progress in moving to open access. So nearly 20 years later, only about 15% of research is open access globally. And understandably, governments, libraries and policymakers have been a bit frustrated with this pace of change. So in September 2018, we saw the launch of Coalition S, which was 12 national research funders, now 21, so it's gaining traction, including UKRI, with the support of the European Research Council, launched an initiative to make their research fully open access from 2020, and this was called Plan S. I'm sure you're aware there have been revisions now to this proposal released in May of this year. So they've revised this timeline, thankfully, to 2025 to full open access, but this is still a bit of an unknown area. They previously excluded hybrid journals such as the IJLCD, which can publish papers behind the subscription paywall and also open access from this funded research, but they've now amended this and they can be included provided that they're part of a transitional deal, so a read and publish deal. So these transitional deals, we have a grace period now between 2021 to 2024 to really set up as many transitional deals as we can, and Wiley are working hard on that. But coalitionists have stressed that these agreements are a stepping stone to fully open access one day. So we are a period of great change, uncertainty, and we are in a disruptive market. What do we know about the future? So open access is becoming more prevalent. Many countries will take the lead from Europe and sign up to Plan S. The transitional period of 2021 to 2024 is a gracing period where there is Funders from Coalition S have said we can publish in hybrid journals if the publisher holds a transitional deal. The subscription model will continue to exist, but it is about to go through a fundamental evolution. And 2025 and beyond is still a little bit unclear. So, as I mentioned, Wiley is leading in negotiating transitional or publish and read deals. We have 7 deals so far and are in the process of negotiating others. So we have deals in the Netherlands, Austria, Germany, Hungary, Norway, and 2 in the US with Virginia and Ohio. There is interest from other countries, and you may have seen in the news that we are in negotiations with some of those. So how should we respond? As more authors are required to publish open access by their funder or because their institution is part of a transitional deal, this will have implications for the journal. Revenue earned through a subscription model is not replicable through an open access model at the moment. So there are some serious discussions underway for how to ensure that the journal successfully navigates this period of change. And we believe there are 2 main strategies in order to achieve this. The IJLCD is relevant across disciplines and article output is growing across disciplines. So we need to ideally capture more of the market. So one plan is to publish more. Another plan is to be more efficient, both in terms of cost, but also in time. The decision-making process is already very quick, but that is highly attractive to authors, and quick time to publication is also really appealing, and that's something at Wiley that we are continually working to improve. So there are some big changes ahead, but this is an exciting time to be working on the journal. There are some big discussions going on and big decisions to be made, and I look forward to working with the current team, but also the new editors-in-chief in this exciting time for the IJLCD. So I'll hand back to Amit now for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone. It was great to hear about the day-to-day reality of being an editor-in-chief, but also more about the relationship between the IJLCD Editors-in-Chief and the publisher. So thank you everyone for that. I think now we're just going to take some questions that I think people may have about the editor-in-chief roles. So I'll just pose a few of them and ask specific people to respond, but please everyone do chip in if you have points to make. So I'm just wondering initially, because I'm aware this is the question that probably the editors-in-chief get all the time, and Cristina, you've touched on this to some degree, around how much of your week is actually taken up by the editor-in-chief role. You mentioned 2 to 3 hours, but I was unclear if you meant that was for the associate editor or for the editors-in-chief as well. Stephen and Cristina, would you mind telling us about this?
Cristina, please go ahead.
I'll expand, shall I? I would say it's probably closer to the 3 hours for the editors-in-chief and probably closer to the 2 hours for the associate editors. But as I said, it does vary over the year. It's quite hard to put a figure on it because it's not all done in one great big chunk. You tend to have to be, well, I find, and I think Stephen agrees, that it's a good idea to sort of stay on top of it, and you do need to be able to be responsive as an editor-in-chief to issues that arise or peaks in workload if things are particularly busy or there's one of the strategic activities going on, like an annual lecture or something like that, and then the workload goes up. But I would say there is flexibility. That's what's one of the really nice aspects of it that lots of people appreciate, is that you can work it around your other workload, and people find it a very people find their own way of doing the role, I would say. Would you agree, Stephen? I
would agree, and I'd also say that it's not a matter of life and death if a decision is put off for another day. So it's not the same as working in a clinical field where a decision often has to be made there and then. There is a sense of saying, well, if it needs to wait till the weekend or it needs to be put off to next week because of workload, that's fine. the issue, as Cristina quite rightly said, is keeping on top of things. And I would also say, with the benefit of many years' experience in Israel, that when I came in as an associate editor 9 years ago, I took every paper as being the most important thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I would read them and I'd look at commas and punctuation, and I'd obsess about whether someone has said the right word in this, that way or the other. Whereas now, I think what happens is you just get very attuned to what you're looking for, and you are able to make decisions very quickly, very professionally. And that does take a bit of time, but the evidence we have is that every time we have new associate editors who we support a lot, they're our test bed for are we helping people learn the skills, because it is a weird thing to be doing. And actually, the evidence is that people find the system that we use, Manuscript Central, everything's in one place. It's all on one desktop, so you can see where things should be. You're reminded when you have to make decisions, so you're not having to hold too much in your head. And you can spot whether a paper has potential, and you can also spot a paper that really shouldn't be being published. And so it's quite an interesting development in terms of one's own critical skills for thinking what makes good research, what makes research that readers of IJLCD will actually want. So there is a decision-making process, but I would say that it's a joy. It's not something that I ever think, oh my goodness, I've got to do this today. And yeah, I personally try to keep on top of things. I'll have a look at the desktop every day, every couple of days, and just make sure I've got time to do the work that's needed. And occasionally we'll get a paper that demands a lot of attention. But I would say that working with Cristina as editor-in-chief and working with the team of AEs makes it all very, very straightforward, because if I have a query or a concern, I can talk to anybody on the team and problem solve. And so you're never on your own having to make these decisions.
Thank you so much, both of you. I wonder if that takes us on to one of the other questions I wanted to ask about some of the requirements of the role. So you talked about the development there that you've gone through in the position. The role requires some leadership skills, some social media skills. Do you have any reflections, either Nikki from the resources you provide at Wiley, or Stephen and Cristina just from your experiences, about the development process that's required to really embrace those aspects as the editor-in-chief?
Shall we go first from our perspective then? I think the model that we've ended up with, Stephen, isn't it, is an apprenticeship model, really, that we learn through doing and through peer support is the way that we've developed lots of the skills. And also, I think sort of by, without even talking about it, Stephen and I have sort of each moved into areas that feel more comfortable in terms of the skills that we bring to the role and our own experiences that we've brought to before becoming editors-in-chief. So we've sort of negotiated between us who does which bits, or who takes the lead in which parts of the role, and that's happened quite naturally. So in terms of actually doing it, it has been more of an apprenticeship model, I would say, and I think that's very successful, actually, because you can talk about this forever, but actually you have to do it, and know that you've got somebody who you can unpick and unpack problems with, I think, is the best way to learn the actual nuts and bolts of doing the job. In terms of some of the other aspects, like the leadership aspects, I think Stephen and I were both reflecting that maybe we haven't taken as much opportunity as we could have done of the wonderful resources that the publishers actually offer for developing people in their editorial role. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that, Nikki?
Yes, thank you. So we do at Wiley provide some resources for people who are arriving to an editor-in-chief position new, not having experience in a really senior leadership role before for a journal. So we provide an editor toolkit, which has resources to, for example, the editor guidelines of COPE, the Committee on Publishing Ethics. We do encourage all our editors to adhere to the COPE guidelines where possible. We recommend that new editors-in-chief attend a training course that's put on by the Association ALPS. Let me think if I can get the acronym. So the Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers. There we go. They do host regular courses for editors particularly if they're new to the role. We encourage editors to go on that. And we also have some online tools, and I'm also here to help people settle into the role. And if they've got any questions on the publishing side, you know, me and the team that we work on the journal are very responsive to any queries. There's no query too silly.
And if I can give a lived example of this development, 3 or 4 years ago, Twitter to me was just a ridiculous kind of concept that people would talk about, and you were either a tweeter or not a tweeter. And Cristina kind of came in, and you had experience of tweeting, didn't you? And I very reluctantly said, all right, we'll do it then. And we started off with 2 followers, and then within the blink of an eye, you know, we're up to thousands, 4,000 followers. And Cristina takes lead in tweeting because she's got a very natural way of knowing how to construct these things and hits the right market. And occasionally I'll dip my toe in and get the spelling right and get the message right, and it's a joy. But you know, again, it's about team working, and there's absolutely no reason why any of the associate editors couldn't be taking the lead. And I think that's the important thing. It's about somebody taking the lead and ensuring the rest of the team learns through that. So we do skill mix, I think, really, really well. And as Cristina said, without ever having really talked about, we just get on with the job. But what we haven't done really well, I think, is, as Cristina said, take advantage of Wiley's worldwide resources. And before I leave, maybe I should go on to these courses and get my money's worth, because clearly there's a lot of stuff out there. But I wouldn't forget that I think college as well, Royal College, is very supportive. And if someone was thinking of applying following this webinar, hopefully, I don't think that it would be a question of saying, there you are, get on with it. I think there's a huge amount of support here, particularly from Cristina and myself. You know, this is a model in which we hand over. It's like regeneration of the Time Lords. All our knowledge should be passed forward, and we're not just running away here. We will be available, and we will always support people.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, even though we maybe haven't exploited the more formal training from Wiley, that just to reinforce the fantastic support that we do get and how responsive Nikki and her team are. And so we've learned through doing, and it feels safe to learn through doing, because we know we can say, oh, this issue's popped up and it's caused some concern, and we know that we can always get a very fast response to that if we ask a question of Wiley. So it's a safe team within which to learn on the job, I would say, and learn through that apprenticeship model.
And just to add, I know that as part of the recruitment process, we're looking explicitly for a handover period. So when we appoint the new editors-in-chief, it's not a matter of, there you go, there's the IJLCD, do what you will. There's an active sort of 6-month handover process where you, as you say, will kind of mentor the incumbent to kind of learn all the skills that they need, so that they're ready come kind of September time to really embrace the role. I wonder if that leads us then onto some of the items from the JD that I think it would be interesting to discuss. So one thing we've mentioned in the JD is that you need a proven track record in research to be a candidate for this role. Could you, Stephen and Cristina, tell us a little bit more about that?
Shall I go first? Yeah, okay. Well, it's an academic endeavour. What's unique about the IJLCD is that it also cuts across the clinical professional world. So whilst it would be nice to think that this was somehow clinical in spirit, in the end we are judging people's academic work, and it's incredible to think that the work that goes into producing papers is huge, because it's not just writing the paper, it's the research on which it's based that matters. And evidence is so important. It's important to us as a profession about our integrity, about those ethical standards that Nikki mentioned. So there is a sense here that having experience of research is vital for this role. And experience means many different things in this context. It's not that we're looking for necessarily professors who have attracted multi-million-pound grants and led huge research teams and have got big labs. It's not about that. It's about a willingness to engage and be interested in research. And we mustn't forget here that we are working on a journal where papers come in all sorts of related areas that we might not necessarily have a vested interest in. So I may be dealing with papers on adult schizophrenia, public policy, education of clinicians, things that I haven't had direct research experience of, but I do have an interest in those areas, and I have an interest in the methods that people are using. My particular area is qualitative research. Cristina is particularly strong on quantitative, so we do cut across in those strengths. But there is a very important point raised by this question, which is that a proven record means that you have published, that you have disseminated your work, that you have engaged with your communities, be it through conferences, through networking. It may be that you work in a higher education institute, but you may be a clinical academic in another setting. What matters is that you have a passion for research.
I agree, passion, and also the confidence that you can judge the methodological merit of a paper, even if it's not in your direct field, I think. And I think I feel a responsibility that the papers that we publish, clinicians are going to pick up and run with, and it's our responsibility to make sure that what gets in IJLCD is of robust enough quality for me to feel happy that somebody should be applying it to their practice in a safe and ethical way to support people with speech, language and communication needs. So it's about being confident that you can make those judgment calls, I think, as well as the passion for clinically applied research. Yeah.
So as a related question, would you say is a benefit, a drawback, or neither to be a practicing clinician?
I think Steve and I feel very, very strongly that you don't necessarily have to be practicing right now, but it's certainly a huge benefit to have practiced or be practicing and to be in touch and engaged with what it's like to be a speech and language therapist now, and what it's like to be delivering services now as an SLT. We, in our sort of mission statement for IJLCD, we've both amped up the clinical relevance. I think during our tenure we've tried to make even more of a central tenet of what we do in IJLCD, and I think unless you're a practitioner it's quite hard to make those judgments. So A, it's about making those judgments about what's clinically relevant, and B, it's also about really pushing those authors of those more theoretical papers to tell us, well, what does this actually mean for a clinician? What's the point of what you're doing here in this paper, to make sure that our readership is fully served by what it is that we're doing. Would you have anything?
No, absolutely agree. That doesn't preclude or exclude blue sky thinking. You know, the theoretical stuff is incredibly important as long as it can be contextualized within a contemporary clinical field, and the sense that actually it's a great responsibility to be an editor-in-chief, because actually you're steering the direction of the journal. And I think that it's worth saying, and I don't think we've actually said, is that you do have editorial independence. The buck stops with the editors-in-chief. Yes, we do delegate to associate editors, but in the end it's the editors-in-chief who make the decisions and decide what the journal should look like, how it should feel. And obviously, if we're getting it right, then wonderful. If we're shifting in the wrong direction, it will take time for that to come to be realised. But that's something that needs to be constantly checked by the team mechanisms that we've discussed. So, you know, it is an absolute privilege being an editor-in-chief. I can really say that honestly. But it's also sometimes a reminder that one has a big responsibility to take the journal forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from the RCSLT point of view that IJLCD really is a mouthpiece for research in the profession, and we therefore need the editors-in-chief to be fully entrenched in research within speech and language therapy, but also have that real clinical focus, because at the end of the day, this is the journal of the professional body, and therefore really has to have relevance for practicing SLTs across the UK. Thank you so much for all of your contributions to Nikki and to the IJLCD Editor-in-Chief. Really nice to hear about those. Just to remind people that the applying for the roles is up until 9 o'clock on Monday, I think it is, the 6th of January, just in the new year. So please do consider applying for the roles if what you've heard today has been interesting to you. And if between now and then you would like to get in touch with any of us to find out a little bit more information, I'm sure everybody will be very happy to provide that for you. Just to wrap up, Of course, we run a host of webinars here through the RCSLT, so please do go to this link if you're interested in listening to further webinars in the new year. Just to thank everybody all again for attending today, and wish you all the best of luck if you are considering applying for the role of an editor-in-chief for the IJLCD. Thank you very much.